everybody. How are you today? Today was going to be the recap of the whole week, but I decided to do that tomorrow. What's going to happen? I'm going to read what I read from last Saturday till today. Now let's write down what I'm going to read today. Second Kings 8. 14. There we go. That's good. Okay. So, what I'm going to be reading tomorrow is all the daily prayers, which is all written down, and all of the verses I read in the whole chapters. So that's going to be one heck of a day. So I'm going to write down today's verses on that page I have already set. I'm going to have to redo that to Saturday, though, because it says Friday on the top. Just give me 1 second. I hope everybody's well today. Because there's people that's in school today that watch my devotions. And there's people that work during the week. So I figured do it tomorrow so maybe most of them can see it, you know? I'll be starting 1 second. Here we go. Okay. Hey, Alexis, how are you? Why aren't you in school, sweetheart? You're sick? Oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart. You want to listen to my devotions? Maybe it'll make you feel better. Okay, I'm going to start off with the Lord's Prayer. Hit the like button. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us for our trespasses. Forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. And God, please let Alexis feel better. Make her sickness go away. Fill her soul with happiness and healthiness. Amen. Okay. The daily prayer is, teach me, O Lord, to have compassion on my brothers and sisters at all times. Right, sweetheart? Yep. I'm going to read that again. Teach me, O Lord, to have compassion on my brothers and sisters at all times. And that comes from the verse Ephesians 4:2. Humility and gentleness with patience, bearing with on another in love. It's true. And there'll be a recap tomorrow of all week, Alexis. So if you want to come for that, that'll be a long one. The daily verse is Psalms 73:26. Oh, yeah. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart, my portion forever. That's so true. And now what I do, Alexis, I have the app read 6 chapters. I read 3 yesterday. Today's not a good day for me to read because my eyes are like shot already. Because I just got up. I overslept. So we're on. Oh boy. I clicked the wrong one. 2 Kings, right? Yeah. Yeah, 2 Kings, I believe, on number Hold on, let me get the paper. 2 Kings number 8. And so the app will read it, Alexis, because he's faster and better. And he can pronounce all the words. So you won't go saying, what did she say? Now, Alexis, remember, drink plenty of water. At least 8 glasses a day. Or every hour, every half hour. Depends how hard it is over there. Okay, I'm going to stop playing it, okay? The 2 Kings chapter 8.
Chapter 8. Elisha said to the woman whose son he had restored to... Chapter 8. Elisha said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Get ready, you and your household, and go live as a resident alien wherever you can. For the Lord has announced a 7-year famine, and it has already come to the land." So the woman got ready, and did what the man of God said. She and her household lived as resident aliens in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. When the woman returned from the land of the Philistines at the end of 7 years, she went to appeal to the king for her house and field. The king had been speaking to Gehazi, the attendant of the man of God, saying, "Tell me all the great things Elisha has done." While he was telling the king how Elisha restored the dead son to life, the woman whose son he had restored to life came to appeal to the king for her house and field. So Gehazi said, "My lord the king, this is the woman, and this is the son Elisha restored to life." When the king asked the woman, she told him the story. So the king appointed a court official for her, saying, "Restore all that was hers, along with all the income from the field from the day she left the country until now." Elisha came to Damascus while King Ben-Hadad of Aram was sick. And the king was told, "The man of God has come here." So the king said to Hazael, "Take a gift with you, and go meet the man of God. Inquire of the Lord through him, will I recover from this sickness?" Hazael went to meet Elisha, taking with him a gift, 40 camel loads of all the finest products of Damascus. When he came and stood before him, he said, "Your son King Ben-Hadad of Aram has sent me to ask you, will I recover from this sickness?" Elisha told him, "Go say to him, you are sure to recover. But the Lord has shown me that he is sure to die." Then he stared steadily at him until he was ashamed. The man of God wept, and Hazael asked, "Why is my Lord weeping?" He replied, "Because I know the evil you will do to the people of Israel. You will set their fortresses on fire. You will kill their young men with the sword. You will dash their children to pieces. You will rip open their pregnant women."
Oh.
Hazael said, "How could your servant, a mere dog, do such a mighty deed?" Elisha answered, "The Lord has shown me that you will be king over Aram." Hazael left Elisha and went to his master, who asked him, "What did Elisha say to you?" He responded, "He told me you are sure to recover." The next day Hazael took a heavy cloth, dipped it in water, and spread it over the king's face. Ben-Hadad died, and Hazael reigned in his place. In the 5th year of Israel's king Joram, son of Ahab, Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, became king of Judah, replacing his father. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. He walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done, for Ahab's daughter was his wife. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight. For the sake of his servant David, the Lord was unwilling to destroy Judah, since he had promised to give a lamp to David and his sons forever. During Jehoram's reign, Edom rebelled against Judah's control and appointed their own king. So Jehoram crossed over to Zair with all his chariots. Then at night he set out to attack the Edomites, who had surrounded him and the chariot commanders. But his troops fled to their tents. So Edom is still in rebellion against Judah's control today. Libnah also rebelled at that time. The rest of the events of Jehoram's reign, along with all his accomplishments, are written in the historical record of Judah's kings. Jehoram rested with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and his son Ahaziah became king in his place. In the 12th year of Israel's king Joram, son of Ahab, Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, became king of Judah. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Athaliah, granddaughter of Israel's king Omri. He walked in the ways of the house of Ahab, and did what was evil in the Lord's sight, like the house of Ahab, for his father had married into the house of Ahab. Ahaziah went with Joram son of Ahab to fight against King Hazael of Aram in Ramoth-Gilead, and the Arameans wounded Joram. So King Joram returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds that the Arameans had inflicted on him in Ramoth-Gilead when he fought against Aram's King Hazael. Then Judah's king Ahaziah son of Jehoram went down to Jezreel to visit Joram son of Ahab, since Joram was ill. Chapter 9. The prophet Elisha called one of the sons of the prophets and said, "Tuck your mantle under your belt, take this flask of oil with you, and go to Ramoth-Gilead. When you get there, look for Jehu son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi. Go in, get him away from his colleagues, and take him to an inner room. Then take the flask of oil, pour it on his head, and say, 'This is what the Lord says. I anoint you king over Israel.'
Oh.
Open the door and escape. Don't wait." Go to Ramoth-Gilead. When he arrived, the army commanders were sitting there, so he said, "I have a message for you, commander." Jehu asked, "For which one of us?" He answered, "For you, commander." So Jehu got up and went into the house. The young prophet poured the oil on his head and said, "This is what the Lord God of Israel says. I anoint you king over the Lord's people Israel. You are to strike down the house of your master Ahab, so that I may avenge the bloodshed by the hand of Jezebel, the blood of my servants the prophets, and of all the servants of the Lord. The whole house of Ahab will perish, and I will wipe out all of Ahab's males, both slave and free, in Israel. I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat."
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Then the young prophet opened the door and escaped. When Jehu came out to his master's servants, they asked, "Is everything all right? Why did this crazy person come to you?" Then he said to them, "You know the sort, and they're ranting." But they replied, "That's a lie. Tell us." So Jehu said, "He talked to me about this. This is what the Lord says. I anoint you king over Israel." Each man quickly took his garment and put it under Jehu on the bare steps. They blew the ram's horn and proclaimed, "Jehu is king." Then Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Joram and all Israel had been at Ramoth-Gilead on guard against King Hazael of Aram. But King Joram had returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds that the Arameans had inflicted on him when he fought against Aram's King Hazael. Jehu said, "If you commanders wish to make me king, then don't let anyone escape from the city to go tell about it in Jezreel." Jehu got into his chariot and went to Jezreel, since Joram was laid up there, and King Ahaziah of Judah had gone down to visit Joram. Now the watchman was standing on the tower in Jezreel. He saw Jehu's mob approaching, and shouted, "I see a mob." Joram responded, "Choose a rider and send him to meet them, and have him ask, 'Do you come in peace?'" So a horseman went to meet Jehu and said, "This is what the king asks. Do you come in peace?" Jehu replied, "What do you have to do with peace? Fall in behind me." The watchman reported, "The messenger reached them but hasn't started back." So he sent out a second horseman, who went to them and said, "This is what the king asks. Do you come in peace?" Jehu answered, "What do you have to do with peace? Fall in behind me." Again the watchman reported, "He reached them but hasn't started back. Also the driving is like that of Jehu, son of Nimshi. He drives like a madman." "Get the chariot ready," Joram shouted, and they got it ready. Then King Joram of Israel and King Ahaziah of Judah set out, each in his own chariot, and met Jehu at the plot of land of Naboth the Jezreelite. When Joram saw Jehu, he asked, "Do you come in peace, Jehu?" He answered, "What peace can there be as long as there is so much prostitution and sorcery from your mother Jezebel?" Joram turned around and fled, shouting to Ahaziah, "It's treachery, Ahaziah." Then Jehu drew his bow and shot Joram between the shoulders. The arrow went through his heart, and he slumped down in his chariot. Jehu said to Bidkar his aide, "Pick him up and throw him on the plot of ground belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember when you and I were riding side by side behind his father Ahab, and the Lord uttered this pronouncement against him. As surely as I saw the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons yesterday, this is the Lord's declaration. So will I repay you on this plot of land. This is the Lord's declaration. So now, according to the word of the Lord, pick him up and throw him on the plot of land." When King Ahaziah of Judah saw what was happening, he fled up the road toward Beth-Hagan. Jehu pursued him, shouting, "Shoot him too." So they shot him in his chariot at Gur Pass near Ibleam. But he fled to Megiddo and died there. Then his servants carried him to Jerusalem in a chariot, and buried him in his father's tomb in the city of David. It was in the 11th year of Joram son of Ahab that Ahaziah had become king over Judah. When Jehu came to Jezreel, Jezebel heard about it. So she painted her eyes, fixed her hair, and looked down from the window. As Jehu entered the city gate, she said, "Do you come in peace, Zimri, killer of your master?" He looked up toward the window and said, "Who is on my side? Who?" 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him, and he said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down, and some of her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses.
Oh
And
boy.
Jehu rode over her. Then he went in, ate and drank, and said, "Take care of this cursed woman, and bury her, since she's a king's daughter." But when they went out to bury her, they did not find anything but the skull, the feet, and the hands. So they went back and told him. And he said, "This fulfills the Lord's word that he spoke through his servant Elijah the Tishbite. In the plot of land at Jezreel, the dogs will eat Jezebel's flesh. Jezebel's corpse will be like manure on the surface of the ground in the plot of land at Jezreel.
Oh
So
boy.
that no one will be able to say, 'This is Jezebel.'" Chapter 10. Since Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria, Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria to the rulers of Jezreel, to the elders and saying, "Your master's sons are with you, and you have chariots, horses, a fortified city, and weaponry. So when this letter arrives, select the most qualified of your master's sons, set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house." However, they were terrified and reasoned, "Look, 2 kings couldn't stand against him. How can we?" So the overseer of the palace, the overseer of the city, the elders and the guardians sent a message to Jehu. "We are your servants, and we will do whatever you tell us. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever you think is right." Then Jehu wrote them a second letter, saying, "If you are on my side, and if you will obey me, bring me the heads of your master's sons at this time tomorrow at Jezreel." All 70 of the king's sons were being cared for by the city's prominent men. When the letter came to them, they took the king's sons and slaughtered all 70,
Oh my.
with their heads in baskets, and sent them to Jehu at Jezreel. When the messenger came and told him, "They have brought the heads of the king's sons," the king said, "Pile them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the city gate until morning." The next morning, when he went out and stood at the gate, he said to all the people, "You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him. But who struck down all these? Know then that not a word the Lord spoke against the house of Ahab will fail. For the Lord has done what he promised through his servant Elijah." So Jehu killed all who remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his great men, close friends, and priests, leaving him no survivors. Then he set out and went to Samaria. On the way, while he was at Beth-Eked of the shepherds, Jehu met the relatives of King Ahaziah of Judah, and asked, "Who are you?" They answered, "We're Ahaziah's relatives. We've come down to greet the king's sons and the queen mother's sons." Then Jehu ordered, "Take them alive." So they took them alive and then slaughtered them at the pit of Beth-Eked, 42 men. He didn't spare any of them. When he left there, he found Jehonadab, son of Rechab, coming to meet him. He greeted him and then asked, "Is your heart one with mine?" "It is," Jehonadab replied. Jehu said, "If it is, give me your hand." So he gave him his hand, and Jehu pulled him up into the chariot with him. Then he said, "Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord." So he let him ride with him in his chariot. When Jehu came to Samaria, he struck down all who remained from the house of Ahab in Samaria, until he had annihilated his house, according to the word of the Lord spoken to Elijah. Then Jehu brought all the people together and said to them, "Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him a lot. Now therefore summon to me all the prophets of Baal, all his servants and all his priests. None must be missing, for I have a great sacrifice for Baal. Whoever is missing will not live." However, Jehu was acting deceptively in order to destroy the servants of Baal. Jehu commanded, "Consecrate a solemn assembly for Baal." So they called one. Then Jehu sent messengers throughout all Israel, and all the servants of Baal came. No one failed to come. They entered the temple of Baal, and it was filled from one end to the other. Then he said to the custodian of the wardrobe, "Bring out the garments for all the servants of Baal." So he brought out their garments. Then Jehu and Jehonadab, son of Rechab, entered the temple of Baal. And Jehu said to the servants of Baal, "Look carefully to see that there are no servants of the Lord here among you, only servants of Baal." Then they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had stationed 80 men outside, and he warned them, "Whoever allows any of the men I am placing in your hands to escape will forfeit his life for theirs." When he finished offering the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guards and officers, "Go in and kill them. Don't let anyone out." So they struck them down with the sword. Then the guards and officers threw the bodies out and went into the inner room of the temple of Baal. They brought out the pillar of the temple of Baal and burned it, and they tore down the pillar of Baal. Then they tore down the temple of Baal and made it a latrine, which it still is today. Jehu eliminated Baal worship from Israel, but he did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit, worshipping the gold calves that were in Bethel and Dan. Nevertheless, the Lord said to Jehu, "Because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my sight, and have done to the house of Ahab all that was in my heart. 4 generations of your sons will sit on the throne of Israel. Yet Jehu was not careful to follow the instruction of the Lord God of Israel with all his heart. He did not turn from the sins that Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. In those days the Lord began to reduce the size of Israel. He defeated the Israelites throughout their territory from the Jordan eastward, the whole land of Gilead, the Gadites, the Reubenites, and the Manassites, from Aroer, which is by the Arnon Valley, through Gilead to Bashan. The rest of the events of Jehu's reign, along with all his accomplishments and all his might, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. Jehu rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria. His son Jehoahaz became king in his place. The length of Jehu's reign over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. Chapter 11. When Athaliah, Ahaziah's mother, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to annihilate all the royal heirs. Jehosheba, who was King Jehoram's daughter and Ahaziah's sister, secretly rescued Joash, son of Ahaziah, from among the king's sons, who were being killed, and put him and the one who nursed him in a bedroom. So he was hidden from Athaliah and was not killed. Joash in the Lord's temple 6 years I reigned over the land. In the 7th year Jehoiada sent for the commanders of hundreds, the Kerites, and the guards. He had them come to him in the Lord's temple, where he made a covenant with them and put them under oath. He showed them the king's son and commanded them, "This is what you are to do. A third of you who come on duty on the Sabbath are to provide protection for the king's palace. A third are to be at the foundation gate, and a third at the gate behind the guards. You are to take turns providing protection for the palace. Your 2 divisions that go off duty on the Sabbath are to provide the king protection at the Lord's temple. Completely surround the king with weapons in hand. Anyone who approaches the ranks is to be put to death. Be with the king in all his daily tasks." So the commanders of hundreds did everything the priest Jehoiada commanded. They each brought their men, those coming on duty on the Sabbath and those going off duty, and came to the priest Jehoiada. The priest gave to the commanders of hundreds King David's spears and shields that were in the Lord's temple. Then the guards stood with their weapons in from the right side of the temple to the left side, by the altar and by the temple. Jehoiada brought out the king's son, put the crown on him, gave him the testimony, and made him king. They anointed him and clapped their hands and cried, "Long live the king." When Athaliah heard the noise from the guard and the crowd, she went out to the people at the Lord's temple. She looked, and there was the king standing by the pillar according to the custom. The commanders and the trumpeters were by the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Athaliah tore her clothes and screamed, "Treason!" Then the priest Jehoiada ordered the commanders of hundreds in charge of the army, "Take her out between the ranks, and put to death by the sword anyone who follows her." For the priests had said, "She ought to be put in." They arrested her, and she went through the horse entrance to the king's palace, where she was put to death. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord, the king, and the people, that they would be the Lord's people, and another covenant between the king and the people. So all the people of the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed its altars and images to pieces, and they killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, at the altars. Then Jehoiada the priest appointed guards for the Lord's temple. He took the commanders of hundreds, the Kerites, the guards, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king from the Lord's temple. They entered the king's palace by way of the guard's gate. Then Joash sat on the throne of the kings. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, for they had put Athaliah to death by the sword in the king's palace. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. Chapter 12. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zibiah. She was from Beersheba. Throughout the time the priest Jehoiada instructed him, Joash did what was wrong in the Lord's sight, yet the high places were not taken away. The people continued sacrificing and burning incense on the high places. Then Joash said to the priests, all the dedicated silver brought to the Lord's temple, census silver, silver from vows, and all silver voluntarily given for the Lord's temple, take it from his assessor and repair whatever damage is found in the temple. But by the 23rd year of the reign of King Joash, the priests had not repaired the damage to the temple. So King Joash called the priest Jehoiada and the other priests and asked, why haven't you repaired the temple's damage? Since you haven't, don't take any silver from your assessors. Instead, hand it over for the repair of the temple. So the priests agreed that they would receive no silver from the people, and would not be the ones to repair the temple's damage. Then the priest Jehoiada took a chest, bored a hole in its lid, and set it beside the altar on the right side as one enters the Lord's temple. The priest who guarded the threshold put into the chest all the silver that was brought to the Lord's temple. Whenever they saw there was a large amount of silver in the chest, the king's secretary and the high priest would go bag up and tally the silver found in the Lord's temple. Then they would give the weighed silver to those doing the work, those who oversaw the Lord's temple. They in turn would pay it out to those working on the Lord's temple, the carpenters, the builders, the masons, and the stone cutters, and would use it to buy timber and quarried stone to repair the damage to the Lord's temple and for all expenses for temple repairs. However, no silver bowls, wick trimmers, sprinkling basins, trumpets, or any articles of gold or silver were made for the Lord's temple from the contributions brought to the Lord's temple. Instead, it was given to those doing the work, and they repaid with it. No accounting was required from the men who received the silver to pay those doing the work, since they worked with integrity. The silver from the guilt offering and the sin offering was not brought to the Lord's temple, since it belonged to the priests. At that time King Hazael of Aram marched up and fought against Gath and captured it. Then he planned to attack Jerusalem. So King Joash of Judah took all the items consecrated by himself and by his ancestors, Judah's kings Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, as well as all the gold found in the treasuries of the Lord's temple and in the king's palace. And he sent them to King Hazael of Aram. Then Hazael withdrew from Jerusalem. The rest of the events of Joash's reign, along with all his accomplishments, are written in the historical record of Judah's kings. Joash's servants conspired against him and attacked him at Beth Millo on the road that goes down to Silla. It was his servants Jozabad son of Shimeath and Jehozabad son of Shomer who attacked him. He hid him with his fathers in the city of David, and his son Amaziah became king in his place. Chapter 13. Third year of Judah's king Joash, son of Azahiah, Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, became king over Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, and followed the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he handed them over to King Hazael of Aram, and to his son Ben-Hadad during their reigns. Then Jehoahaz sought the Lord's favor, and the Lord heard him, for he saw the oppression the king of Aram inflicted on Israel. Therefore the Lord gave Israel a deliverer, and they escaped from the power of the Arameans. Then the people of Israel returned to their former way of life, but they didn't turn away from the sins that the house of Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. Jehoahaz continued them, and the Asherah pole also remained standing in Samaria. Jehoahaz did not have an army left, except for 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers, because the king of Aram had destroyed them, making them like dust at threshing. The rest of the events of Jehoahaz's reign, along with all his accomplishments and his might, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. Jehoahaz rested with his fathers, and he was buried in Samaria. His son Jehoash became king in his place. In the 37th year of Judah's king Joash, Jehoash son of Jehoahaz became king over Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 16 years. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He did not turn away from all the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat had caused Israel to commit, but he continued them. The rest of the events of Jehoash's reign, along with all his accomplishments and the power he had to wage war against Judah's king Amaziah, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. Jehoash rested with his fathers, and Jeroboam sat on his throne. Jehoash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. When Elisha became sick with the illness from which he died, King Jehoash of Israel went down and wept over him, and said, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." Elisha responded, "Get a bow and arrows." So he got a bow and arrows. Then Elisha said to the king of Israel, "Grasp the bow." So the king grasped it, and Elisha put his hands on the king's hands.
Oh, Elisha.
Elisha said, "Open the east window." So he opened it. Elisha said, "Shoot." So he shot. Then Elisha said, "The Lord's arrow of victory, yes, the arrow of victory over Aram. You are to strike down the Arameans in Aphek until you have put an end to them." Then Elisha said, "Take the arrows." So he took them. Then Elisha said to the king of Israel, "Strike the ground." So he struck the ground 3 times and stopped. The man of God was angry with him and said, "You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck down Aram until you had put an end to them. But now you will strike down Aram only 3 times. Then Elisha died and was buried. Now Moabite raiders used to come into the land in the spring of the year. Once, as the Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a raiding party. So they threw the man into Elisha's tomb. When he touched Elisha's bones, the man revived and stood up.
Oh.
King Hazael of Aram oppressed Israel throughout the reign of Jehoahaz. But the Lord was gracious to them, and had compassion on them, and turned toward them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He was not willing to destroy them. Even now he has not banished them from his presence. King Hazael of Aram died, and his son Ben-Hadad became king in his place. Then Jehoash son of Jehoahaz took back from Ben-Hadad son of Hazael the cities that Hazael had taken in war from Jehoash's father Jehoahaz. Jehoash defeated Ben-Hadad 3 times, and recovered the cities of Israel.
Last one.
Chapter 14. In the 2nd year of Israel's king Jehoash son of Jehoahaz, Ahaziah son of Joash became king of Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoaddan. She was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the Lord's sight, but not like his ancestor David. He did everything his father Joash had done. Yet the high places were not taken away, and the people continued sacrificing and burning incense on the high places. As soon as the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, Amaziah killed his servants who had killed his father the king. However, he did not put the children of the killers to death. As it is written in the book of the law of Moses, where the Lord commanded, "Fathers are not to be put to death because of children, and children are not to be put to death because of fathers. Instead, each one will be put to death for his own sin." Amaziah killed 10,000 Edomites in Salt Valley. He took Selah in battle, and called it Joktheel, which is still its name today. Amaziah then sent messengers to Joash, son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, and challenged him, "Come, let's meet face to face." King Jehoash of Israel sent word to King Amaziah of Judah, saying, "The thistle in Lebanon once sent a message to the cedar in Lebanon, saying, 'Give your daughter to my son as a wife.' Then a wild animal in Lebanon passed by and trampled the thistle. You have indeed defeated Edom, and you have become overconfident. Enjoy your glory and stay at home. Why should you stir up such trouble that you fall, you and Judah with you?" But Amaziah would not listen. So King Jehoash of Israel advanced. He and King Amaziah of Judah met face to face at Beth Shemesh, that belonged to Judah. Judah was routed before Israel, and each man fled to his own tent. King Jehoash of Israel captured Judah's king Amaziah, son of Joash, son of Ahaziah, at Beth Shemesh. Then Jehoash went to Jerusalem and broke down 200 yards of Jerusalem's wall from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate. He took all the gold and silver, all the articles found in the Lord's temple and in the treasuries of the king's palace, and some hostages. Then he returned to Samaria. The rest of the events of Jehoash's reign, along with his accomplishments, his might, and how he waged war against King Amaziah of Judah, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. Jehoash rested with his fathers, and he was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. His son Jeroboam became king in his place. Judah's king Amaziah, son of Joash, lived 15 years after the death of Israel's king Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz. The rest of the events of Amaziah's reign are written in the historical record of Judah's kings. A conspiracy was formed against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. However, men were sent after him to Lachish, and they put him to death there. They carried him back on horses, and he was buried in Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. Then all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in place of his father Amaziah. After Amaziah the king rested with his fathers, Azariah rebuilt Eloth and restored it to Judah. In the 15th year of Judah's king Amaziah, son of Joash, Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 41 years. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He did not turn away from all the sins Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. He restored Israel's border from Lebo-Hamath as far as the sea of the Arabah, according to the word the Lord, the God of Israel, had spoken through his servant, the prophet Jonah, son of Amittai, from Gath-Hepher. For the Lord saw that the affliction of Israel was very bitter, for both slaves and free people. There was no one to help Israel. The Lord had not said he would blot out the name of Israel under heaven, so he delivered them by the hand of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash. The rest of the events of Jeroboam's reign, along with all his accomplishments, the power he had to wage war, and how he recovered for Israel Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. Jeroboam rested with his fathers, the kings of Israel. His son Zechariah became king in his place.
And that will be it for today. Like I said earlier, get the paper out so I can show you. It grew because today. Alright, this is for tomorrow. I'm going to be rewriting this so it can look decent. See, I wrote down all of the verses that we read this past week. And tomorrow I'll be reading those. Okay. And then after that I'll read the daily prayers for each day. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, I think. Or unless I counted wrong. 13 verses and 13 whole paragraphs I have to read tomorrow. Because I said I can't. Okay? So, everybody, have a blessed day and peace out.